Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, or more specifically, Ole Miss every day. Hello, I'm Stephen Willis, and this is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast extra edition. I'm joined by Pratt Rogers, and we're going to talk a little recruiting today. But the first thing, we just got through with the holiday weekend, and this video is going to air on Wednesday night. So the 4th of July happened. This has been a weird weekend. And what was your plans for the 4th? Because you haven't done it quite yet, but what are your plans?
Stephen, I appreciate that you having me on today. I really don't have a whole lot. I'm honestly probably going to work on the 4th of July. Pretty lame, but I'm behind on a lot of stuff. So probably just some personal catch up and may go drink a beer with a friend later, something like that. Nothing exciting. What about you?
Grilling out and swimming, probably drinking some beer.
I'll definitely grill out. I'll grill out. That's mandatory. Yeah.
Yeah. So should be pretty interesting. Now, we've hit the point of the season. I think it's dead periods happen all over recruiting. You got a couple of players that are waiting to announce, that could announce, but for all intents and purposes, it's kind of at a lull right now before we begin truly big game hunting, and we're going to talk about that. So I figured today we could do a little buy or sell of kids that are recruited to other schools to find out if Ole Miss even has a shot at them moving forward. What do you think about that, Pratt?
Let's do it. Shooting from the hip today, kind of gut reaction. But
yeah. Just you send me the text message. You're doing this buy and sell thing, and I was like, okay, that sounds like a decent idea. So let's start with Narell White, out of I think it's St. Martin on the coast.
Yep.
He is part of that group like Jeffrey Rush and Chris Davis and Jamonte Waller, those coast kids that were we were wondering if they were close together. They've kind of gone their separate ways, with 3 of them being committed in completely different parts of the country. But Narell White is committed to Arkansas. Do you buy that he ends up at Ole Miss, or do you sell in the fact that he's going to end up at Arkansas?
I buy that he ends up at Ole Miss. Look, there was a lot of heat on that rumor probably 6 weeks ago. I feel like it was the worst kept secret at that time. If I remember correctly, people were pre-tweeting things saying he had already committed to Ole Miss before it actually happened. Long story short, it never happened. He's still committed to Arkansas. I think the coaching staff is on Narell White almost every single day, if not daily. And I think it's a matter of time. I think you get one more guy on the boat. It's Vogue. It's sexy. And White piles on. So I'm by. He's a Rebel at the end of things. I would be surprised if he's still committed to Arkansas when it's all said and done. May not end up a Rebel, but he's been flirting around with other schools, and I feel like Ole Miss is catching the brunt of his attention right now.
Yeah, I think I would buy that as well. I just don't think Narell's going to end up at Arkansas. He might. I mean, it could absolutely happen. But if you just ask me for gut feelings that are going on, I just don't think he's going to end up there. And Ole Miss can decide exactly how it decides to move forward. But potentially with a couple of players that I just think I'm going to sell on, and I'm going to sell on J.J. Harrell. I think this has been kind of a reverse C.J. Johnson type situation. When he committed to Mississippi State, he got a lot of Twitter hate from Ole Miss people that kind of steeled his resolve of what's going on. And because of that, I just genuinely expect that J.J. Harrell will remain a Mississippi State Bulldog or go to another school. I don't think he's going to Ole Miss, so I'll sell that one.
So J.J. Harrell, I will sell as well. I would actually be a little bit surprised if he ended up at State. You kind of got a new offensive coordinator, new head coach that's a defensive-minded guy. I know he's great friends with Braylon Burnside, and I know that they kind of are a quote-unquote package, or their friendship is pretty deep to where they would like to commit together almost, but that rarely actually happens. And I don't think J.J. Harrell ends up at Ole Miss, but I don't think he ends up at State either. So I'm taking the field. I'm throwing you a curveball, Steven. Option C, I'm taking the field.
All right. Braylon Burnside, you just mentioned that one. He's another one to sell. I think that's a situation after AJ and Luke Altmaier, the next prospect that came out of Starkville, they were going to go all in and get that kid.
Yeah,
I think that's what's going to happen there.
I think they will money whip him until he commits, whether it's or until he signs on the dotted line, because I just don't think they're going to let that become a trend. I think that Burnside's made it apparent that Ole Miss and Mississippi State are the top two options for him. They're not. I don't think the guys in Starkville are going to let that get away and be an AJ Brown 2.0. I agree. I think I would sell. I think he sticks it out in Starkville, but if he goes anywhere, I think it's Ole Miss. So I would not take the field in that one. How about that?
Yeah, there we go. All right, Jamonte Waller. You're talking about taking the field. I kind of take the field on this one because for whatever reason, I don't think he's going to go to Ole Miss. So I've sell that. But I do think he's going to end up maybe at Penn State for whatever reason. That just seems to be the thing that I'm paying attention to where if he doesn't go to Florida, he ends up at Penn State.
Man, there's been so much smoke around Penn State, but I feel like it's so hard for, these Mississippi kids to go head up to the Northeast and go through a big culture shock like that. Maybe that's not 100%.
Well, if you've ever been to State College, it makes Starkville look like a metropolis.
Well, I actually haven't spent much time in Happy Valley, but it would. I believe you on that, but I would pick Florida first. I actually would probably pick Ole Miss number 2, and then probably Penn State 3. But I'll buy that he ends up at Ole Miss one way, some shape. Yeah, I think I may be a little optimistic on that, Steven, but I'd rather be an optimist than a pessimist on it if it's 50-50. How about that?
Yeah, you're dang right about that. It's no fun to be a pessimist.
Yeah.
When you follow sports and you just immediately go to the negative, all that is you'll be right like 95% of the time because things happen. But you can't enjoy watching sports if that happens. But maybe you just enjoy being right. I don't know.
Hey, look, I hope for the best, expect the worst has gotten me through many, many, many Ole Miss games.
Yeah, so it should be quite fun. All right,
Yeah.
The next Ole Miss commitment. I will go first on this one. I think the next Ole Miss commitment will be Dylan Hipp, the tight end, jumbo wide receiver out of Arizona. Damon Williams is all out there. He's recruiting him. I talked to John Wayne Oliver, and apparently all of them are recruiting this guy. I expect him to pop eventually, but that is the guy that I'm paying attention to on the commitment watch.
I hate to not incorporate any own ideas of my own, Steven, but I'm with you. I think Dylan Hipp's any day now. He should be already in the boat, I would imagine. But, I think he's probably next up to bat. I would be surprised if it drug out another week or two, honestly.
All right, so the top 5 wish list, and this can be committed to other school people. This could be uncommitted prospects. I guess we'll alternate on this one for top 5. And again, I will go first because I'm going to take the free space, and that is Kamarion Franklin. Miami just got a commitment from a top edge out of Illinois.
I saw that today.
Yeah, which that has to be some level of good news. Maybe that's a hint that it's a Tennessee Ole Miss type story, but Kamarion Franklin is the guy with him. William Eccles, Jeffrey Rush, and Cameron Beavers. You have a defensive line. That would be a defensive line for the future for Ole Miss football. So I do think Kamarion Franklin is the number 1 player on the wish list.
Yep, I would go Kamarion Franklin number 1 as well for me too. I'll snake it back to you. How about that? I'll go number 2. I would probably be Jamonte Waller. I think we've got to load up on the defensive side of the ball. And look, I mentioned earlier, I'm an optimist about it. I think somebody like that could really step up and almost have like a Sunshine Perkins mentality of, oh, he has potential to get serious playing time day one. So I'm very bullish on him. I'm super excited. If anything, if we're in the game with him right now, and he would definitely be my number two.
Yeah, and we haven't brought this up, this player up, but my number two would be Jimothy Lewis. He was in Oxford 3 times in 9 days before he committed to Mississippi State. This recruitment is not over, although he is from MRA, which is a nice Mississippi State tied area. We'll put it like that. And whenever he gets back to IMG Academy in Florida, this is all going to change. So you just have to fight it until they go back to school. Whenever Jimothy goes back to IMG, put the full court press on him, and he already has seen what you have. But I think him at tackle, that'd be a good position that Ole Miss could look at.
Yep, he was going to be my number four, Steven. My number three would be Caleb Odom. And the reason I think we're set for a while at tight end, honestly. So, and I know that we're recruiting Odom to play receiver more than tight end. And, I just think he could be a instant playmaker as well. He's got the size. He's incredible athlete. Played, I think I mentioned before, played like 6A basketball. Started there too. Was like all conference. I mean, a true freak athlete that I think would, with somebody with an offensive mentality like Kiffin, could really be dangerous with.
Yeah, absolutely. My number three would be Kawan Lacey, the running back out of Texas. He is committed to Nebraska, I think, at the moment, but Ole Miss is going to keep recruiting him pretty consistently, him and Chris Davis both. But Lacey, I do think has special type attributes and kind of fits with what this running back room does. And it could be a Kedrick Riscano type thing where he committed to Michigan State, ended up going to Ole Miss closer to signing day. I think you should look Kewan Lacey.
Not a bad one. My four, as I mentioned, would be Jimothy Lewis. I echo everything you said about him. MRA is definitely Mississippi State funnel. I think that commitment came out of absolutely nowhere. I think that shocked a lot of people. I would be surprised if that sticks. But props to Mississippi State right now. They've got a lot of good athletes in the commit column right now that kind of has me scratching my head a little bit, honestly. But shout out to those guys because Zach Arnett's done a great job already first year.
Well, this was predictable. Whenever Ole Miss took Banks in that situation and won out, and everybody was excited about the NIL, there was going to be some kind of a push. And basically what has happened is one of their wealthy donors decided to cough up some NIL money and got some people to commit. There's just a Band-Aid over the situation that they've already had because it was a week. It has slowed down and got back to normal. And now you have to keep the recruits. And one thing that I talk about in recruiting, especially in this NIL age, is as soon as they know that they're commit, as soon as Jimothy Lewis commits, as soon as Nareel White commits, their number is known. And if it is easier to attack that situation than it is to defend, and they're going to have to defend that situation for 6 months. And I just do not think that Burnside, Harrell, and Lewis, all of them are going to end up in Starkville. I think somebody is going to end up getting that.
Steven, I give that a 0% chance.
Yeah. They're going to play that. And those are probably the 5 players that are on our wish list. We had Kawan Lacey, Jimothy Lewis, Jamonte Waller, Kamarion Franklin, and seems like there was somebody else.
I said Caleb Odom.
That was the 5th one.
Yeah.
So that is probably our top 5 wish list. Now, if you look at Caleb Odom, Ole Miss is trying to get him back to campus before he commits to Alabama. It's a situation where Saban is working his magic, Bama's doing what they do, and Caleb Odom is impressed by because Tommy Reese uses tight ends really well, and jumbo receivers and tight ends have a chance to be a really important weapon in that offense. So I'm pretty impressed by where Ole Miss is in recruiting right now. They're on pace to finish somewhere in the top 20. I do think one or two players are going to pop, and then there's going to be basic big game hunting, and then there's going to be transfer portal stuff. So that is how recruiting is going to look moving forward.
I agree with all that. With 17 commits now for the Rebs, you're kind of starting to fill out your class, and at that point, you got to go for the bigger fish. Since we've had a lot of positive discussion on Ole Miss football today on the recruiting side, any guesses if you said, somebody who may not stick in the commit column, or do you feel comfortable talking about that?
I don't know, but if you just want me to be general about somebody that might not stick, I think it's far more likely that an out-of-state kid flips than an in-state kid.
Yeah. No, I would agree with that.
That's kind of where I am right now.
I would agree with that. I'm trying to think of somebody immediately off the top of my head. I know Eccles just got in the commit column for Ole Miss, so I doubt that changes anytime soon. But I know State's been after him really hard, and they've got a lot of momentum right now. And quite frankly, I didn't take them very seriously at the beginning of the year, and they've come a long way.
Honestly, you shouldn't take them seriously.
Well, I haven't. Yeah. And then I look up, and there's a lot of Mississippi kids committed.
They have mostly non-NIL kids, and they have one or two NIL kids that they've pooled enough resources and able to get them committed. I don't know if there's enough to get them signed, and I don't know if there's enough to keep them in school once they get there. Like I said, the same problems they had a month ago, they have now, but they did put a Band-Aid over and got people to quit talking about it. So we'll see. But hey, the Grove Collective, I'll go ahead and put this up so everybody can see this address as well. But the Grove Collective, Walker Jones is going around doing a lot of yeoman's work. They were named the 9th most ambitious NIL collective in the nation by On3. Walker Jones is advertising the heck out of this collective. And the thing he said when he was on the show with me is that they're trying to get this subscription model really going. And they're putting that into practice. And you can be a member for as little as $21 a month. And if you do that, he can budget the amount of money that he has. It'll help on the recruiting trail. It'll help with everything that's going on if you do that. So just remember, it's a $21 subscription minimum. Obviously, there's higher tiers than that, but it seems like a pretty good deal as well.
Yep. Well, look, I think you kind of touched on all that the Grove Collective's been doing a great job. I saw the same post you did. I think we were a top 10 most ambitious collective. And look, not circling back to State one more time, but, there was a lot of discussion about their NIL really struggling. So you mentioned putting a Band-Aid on it. I'll be interested to see kind of what happens in the next, 6 to 8 months.
Yeah, and a lot of people want to have the argument where hey, see, this happened this week. Do you see? You obviously was full of it. And it's that proves nothing. It essentially, what you've done up to this point to get a commitment is to bid. It's like putting in a bid on the jump rope for heart or the some of a marathon run or something like that. And then after it's over, the bill comes due. And then we'll find out if you were telling the truth at that point. But it just kind of is what it is. Anyway, Pratt, thank you very much for coming on the show. And thanks, everybody, for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast their first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team, Ole Miss, every day. Pratt Rogers, thank you for joining the show today, and we will talk again. I don't think you'll be here next week, but the week after we'll catch back up and get caught up because that's right about around media days. So
can't wait, my man. Thank you.
All right.